Hello, and welcome to another episode of Morgantown Memories. Today we are on location at the Scotch Run Museum in Osage, West Virginia to talk to Mr. Lou Birurakis. Welcome to the museum, Mr. Birurakis.
Thanks for having me here today.
Mr. Birurakis, please tell us your birth date, where you were born, and a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I was born a long time ago, March the 22nd, 1926. I was born in Liberty, which is about a mile west of Osage, up Scotch Run. And I was baptized in Clarksburg because my parents were Greek, and they were affiliated with the Greek Orthodox Church. And there was no church in Morgantown at that time, Greek Orthodox. There was one in Clarksburg, so they took me to Clarksburg. And my godfather, who chose my name, was Steve Birurakis. But anyway, he gave me the name of Eleftherios Birurakis. And Eleftherios at that time was a famous statesman in Greece who helped Greece get their independence and Crete to become part of Greece. And he chose my name to be Eleftherios Birurakis. Well, I had a birth certificate with the same name, and when I went to the first grade at the First Glove Schools, which is just above Osage here, the teacher looked at the birth certificate and she saw the name, and she, up in the right-hand corner, wrote down Louis Berry. And she told me, she says, she pointed to it on a birth certificate and she said, "That's your name from now on." And she wrote it up in the right-hand corner of the birth certificate. So I used that name all the way through school. I went to University High, and during my senior year, the family decided to reverse the last name back to something similar to the original name. So we came with Birurakis. Instead of Birurakis, or instead of Barry, we have the name of Birurakis now, and we still have it. I still use that name. And, like I say, I used Barry all the way through grade school, junior high, and high school. But as a senior, we decided to change the last name back to something similar to the original, which came up with Birurakis, and that's what I use now, Louis Barry. I adopted Barry as a middle name because I had it for so many years. So my official name is Louis Barry Birurakis, and I usually sign my checks with Louis B. Birurakis. I don't write the Barry in. I do sometimes when I'm writing to someone, anyway, especially family. I include Barry because we all used Barry until I was a senior in high school in '44. So, and after I went to high school, I decided to go on to college because my parents emphasized the fact of getting an education. And I think that's one of the reasons why they stayed in Scotch Run, because of WVU. And they wanted us to go and to get an education and get a good job. Because my dad would always come home from the mines all wet, and he always emphasized, don't become a coal miner because it's rough work. And it was rough work, but he stuck it out for the family's sake. And I think that's one reason why he stayed in Scotch Run, was because of WVU. And there were 5 of us, 4 boys and 1 girl, and all 5 of us did go through WVU and graduate. And anyway, and when I went to WVU, all my time growing up in Scotch Run, we did a lot of softball playing, football playing, a lot of sports. And we also went to see WVU play. When they played football, we would go down, and usually we'd go down in pairs or more because we didn't have money to buy the tickets. So we would go down and go along the fence and find a place where there's a little crawl space. And one of the two people that are in the gang would lift the fence up just a little bit, and the other would crawl under, and then he'd pick the fence up, and the other person would crawl under, and that's how we got in the game. But I did want to go to school after graduating from high school. So the summer of '44, after I graduated, I went to WVU summer school. And that was during the war. And a lot of the players had been drafted from WVU. So Coach Rogers was the coach then, and he needed some personnel to fill the squad. So he put out a notice that anybody can try out for football. He basically wanted people who had played high school ball to come and try out. And there was a gentleman from Fairmont who wanted to try out, and he didn't want to go by himself. So he asked me to go with him, and I did because I wanted to play some sports. So we went to the old stadium, and he went up and met with the coach and told him that he had played for Fairmont and he would like to try out. And Coach Rogers said, yes, go down and check out a uniform and pads and get out on the field, because they were in a process of working out then. So he said, can I take my friend with me? And I think Rogers assumed that I had gone to Fairmont too. So he said, yeah, take him and go down on the field, check out equipment, and do whatever you're told to do. So we went down and we checked out the material, pads and pants and shoes, and he helped me with the pads because I didn't know how to put pads on. And we went out on the field, and at the time they were doing a lot of exercise, getting in shape basically. And I was in good shape because I did a lot of running at Scott's Run, playing football and baseball and different sports, racing. So while we were doing all these calisthenics and running, my friend wasn't in good shape at the time. I think he had not done much running because in a few days he quit. And I debated whether to quit because he brought me down. And then somebody that knew me told me to stick it out because he was impressed with what I was doing anyway. So I decided to stick it out. And when we were getting ready for the pit game, they had a scrimmage and they invited the public in the old stadium to come and watch the game. And they invited reporters, and Tony Constantine was there, and he watched the game. And during the game, there was one situation where the coach called for a play. I was on defense, and I have an article in the paper that was published that listed the defense and the offense, and I was listed on the defense. So I was in a left tackle defensive position, and Coach Rogers went to the huddle and told him to run a play through my area. Well, when the ball was snapped, I got through the line, and my opponent, my offensive players that were to block me had played high school ball. They had scholarships. Well, somehow I got through, and I hit the halfback as soon as he got the ball. He didn't get to the line of scrimmage. So coach was watching, and he yelled out, "Hey, there's a guy never played any football, and you guys can't block him?" And he got in the huddle, and I think I kind of summarized that he was going to do the same thing. So they did, and I did the same thing. And I got through the line, and as soon as the halfback got the ball from the quarterback, I put him down. And coach had a baseball hat on. He took that hat off and threw it on the ground. He said a few strong words. He said, "There's a guy never played any football, and you guys can't block him." And he said, "Birurakis, if you play like that, you'll never miss a game." Anyway, but I did do real well. Like I said, I was in good shape, and I did well on the defense. So when we played Pitt, and they beat us, but I played. What he would do would put a senior or a junior who had played before and started him, and in a few minutes he'd send me in, and I did what I had to do anyway. And Tony Constantine was at the game when he heard Rogers say what he did. So Tony lived in Westover, and Westover used the same buses that Scott's Run used, the Blue Ridge bus line that went through Westover. And one evening, we happened to both be on the bus, standing. So he came up, he recognized me, and he came up to me, and while we were riding, he questioned me about what I had planned, and I told him I was planning on going through school to WVU, and he wrote an article in the paper about 4 or 5 days after that scrimmage, and he listed me as a potential standout. Anyway, and I played that year, and I did get a scholarship, because when I went to buy books, I started to pay for my books, and one of the other players who was with me said, "Don't pay for your books. You're on the team. You don't have to buy books." But anyway, he went to the coach and told him about my situation, and they did make arrangements for me to get free books, free tuition, and they even furnished me a room at the men's dorm on North High Street. So I did get a scholarship. Well, after the freshman year, the war was still on, and I was drafted. And I make the remark because about stopping the war, or stopping Germany anyway, because the day I was inducted, I forget, it was May the 11th or something. I have the records of it. 2 days later, in the Morgantown paper, there was a picture of Germany surrendering. And I jokingly say, they heard I was coming, so they gave up. Of course, we were still fighting Japan. But anyway, after the service, after Germany gave up, they started discharging some people. But of course, we still had Japan to take care of. So anyway, I went when I was drafted, and I went to service. And in '47, I actually, while I was in training, when I went to the rifle range, my troop shot as a group, and I happened to score the highest score. And I got a letter of commendation from the colonel and I have a copy of it, I think, in my material. And it commended me for my shooting ability and said how important it was to shoot the M1. And I gave a copy of the commendation that I had been given to my brother who had been discharged, and told him to give a copy of it to the sports writers. So he did, and there was an article, I think Con Hardman wrote an article about my shooting. When I did the shooting and got recognized for it, and the article was put in the paper, I put down jokingly in that space, a little space there that had place to put some writing in, I said Japan saw this article and they gave up, because not long after that Japan gave up. And I jokingly say it wasn't the bomb that stopped Japan, it was my shooting. But anyway, during my junior high school years here at Osage, I was president of the 9th grade class that graduated in '41. I went to University High, and when I graduated in '44, I was president of the senior class. And I went to the university, and anyway, and because of my research on Scotch Run, I did a few things that kind of stood out. One of the things was getting the Liberty sign put back, because I grew up in Liberty, and when they put the Purse Grove Post Office in Liberty, they took the sign down. I think that's the reason they took it down, but it was gone. So I asked the state road if they would replace it. And a gentleman at the state road said, if you show me a picture of the Liberty sign, we'll put it back. And I happened to have one. With my research of Scotch Run, I happened to have a sign, a picture that somebody had taken in '32, in the '30s. And the Liberty sign, unincorporated, was very plain. I have the article, because I went through the newspapers from 1917 all the way to 1952. I went through every Morgantown paper, every day, every page, and wrote down anything pertaining to WVU, University High, or Scotch Run. And I would keep record of it, and I would give a copy of that record, one to the university library, and they have a collection of what I gave them. And I gave a copy to the history department. Ron Lewis, Dr. Lewis, asked for a copy of my findings in the newspapers. Like I said, from 1917 to 1952, and I started in 1917 because that's when Liberty Fuel bought property at Liberty. It wasn't known as Liberty then, because it was a berry area, berry farm. But let's see, I'm twisted up a little bit. But anyway, I decided to go from 1917 because that's when Liberty Fuel bought 2 pieces of property up there at Liberty. The houses on where the post office is, that row of houses there, and also an area across the creek to put a tipple, and that tipple happened to be where our playground was. After the tipple was replaced, that was our playground. But Liberty Tipple put in an opening across the creek. They put an opening in the Swickley vein and was mining coal there for quite a while. But after, like I say, when Liberty Mine closed, they had mined all the coal that they had rights to mine. So after they mined that coal, they took the tipple down, removed the tracks, and that was our playground anyway. So I sent a picture to the state road, and I kept waiting for the sign to be put back, and it wasn't put back. So I called the state road, and I spoke with the gentleman again. I said, "You said if I showed you a sign, you would put it back." He said, "Yes, you did give us a copy of the sign, and it was very good." But he said, "There's one big problem now. The Pertsgrove Post Office is in Liberty." And so we kind of hesitate putting that Liberty sign back because of the post office. But I'll tell you what you could do. You go to the county commission and you convince the county commission to have the roadside put back, and we'll put it back. I said, "Okay, thank you." So I did attend a county commission meeting, and I had information about different things that took place in Scotch Run, especially in Liberty area, with that removing the coal miners from the houses. It's a famous picture that was pretty well famous, where the Liberty Fuel evicted the coal miners from the houses they owned, and just went in and, well, first they gave the men an option to sign an agreement where they're no longer a union member, they're willing to take a pay cut, and they will not talk union or try to persuade anyone else to join the union. And if you sign that pledge, and I have a copy of that pledge, it's with my collection. Well, the coal miners said, "You just signed an agreement that year, giving them a raise and different things." But Frank Christopher was a superintendent of the Liberty mine, and he came from Maryland to work for Liberty Fuel, and he was superintendent, and he says that the price of coal had dropped and he couldn't afford to pay union wages. But the coal miners said, "You had signed you signed agreement, so let's hold on to it till the next contract comes up." But Frank Christopher said, "No, you either sign this agreement that you're no longer a union member and you can still work, but if you don't sign it, this mine's not working for you. You're not working here anymore." Well, the coal miners that lived in the houses had the argument that they'd already had a contract, so they refused to sign it. Well, Christopher, the superintendent, and Liberty Fuel decided to get some people to go in and move the people out. So they went in the morning and took any furniture that the miners had. They put it out on the street, and there's a famous picture that's been shown many times, and I'm sure it's up here someplace. But anyway, they evicted them, put them out on the street, and a few days later, there was a lot of animosity between the union and the non-union people. The non-union people said they're willing to work for less wages, so they got to move in the new house, not new houses. They got to move into houses, and in a few days there was a lot of conflict. There was a riot right there on the street by the post office where those houses were. There was a riot, and at least four miners were shot. They didn't die, but they were shot. and the newspaper had their names in the article when they discussed the shooting. And two of them happened to be Greeks, and they were Union miners, and then there was an African American that was a Union miner. But there was the stories in the newspaper, and I have the article. But there was a lot of, all through the years, there was a lot of friction between a union and non-union. Miners came from Pennsylvania, and the union had special nails rigged where they threw them out on the street, and whoever ran over them had a flat tire. Because I have one of them at home as a demonstrator. I don't know whether they have any here or not, but there was a lot of friction, and that's why when I moved to Morgantown because the house that I found out that was for sale on Coburn Avenue, where I live now, a lady that lived behind the house on Clark Street grew up in Scotch Run at Jerry, and she had a business in Morgantown. But I met her one time on the street, and we got to talking about housing, and I told her I was looking for a house. We had 3 children then, or four. And when I told her I was looking for a house, she says, "Why don't you come and see the house on Coburn Avenue right behind my house?" She lived on Clark Street, which is the street below. So I went to Arkwright, the realtor, had the job of selling the house. So she told me who was selling it. So I went to his office and introduced myself and told him I was interested in the house. And he told me it was for sale. And he let me, he gave me a key, and we went up and I looked at the house. It was a nice big house and 3 floors. And I said, "How much?" And he said, $6,000. And I thought that was a pretty good price, because I had in mind to buy a house up Liberty that was a store and had apartments upstairs, and they wanted $6,000. But between the two, Coburn Avenue happened to be a better deal in my mind. So I went to Arkwright, and when he told me what the price was, I had worked at Katanning after leaving school. After teaching 4 years, I left schooling because of the wages, and she was due then as a 4th child, so 3rd child. And after I left the schooling system after 4 years, because of the pay, it wasn't enough to support family. But the construction work paid a lot better. So I contacted the superintendent that I worked for before, and he told me if I ever want to come back in the ironwork, to just let him know, and if he was working, he would put me to work. So I found out from a friend who I had worked with also that they had a job in Pennsylvania, Katanning, building a powerhouse. So I approached the superintendent and told him that I was available and I'd like to get back in the union. And he said, if you get back in the union, you've got a job. So I went to the local that I had left, but that's another story, because that local was Cumberland. I joined a Cumberland local to work at Albright when they built that powerhouse. So I went to Cumberland, I talked to the BA, and I told him that I don't want to work in Cumberland, but I want to work at Katanning, and that's local 3 in Pittsburgh. And I said, but I have to get back in a union before they can even consider putting me to work. So the BA, the business agent, thought, well, if I join their union, they'll get some money from me. And I'm not going to work there, I'm going to work in Pittsburgh. So he was willing to give me my book back. So I finally got my book, and I went to Katanning and worked 3 or 4 years and saved a lot of money because I was working overtime, and I didn't have much expenses because the house that we had was a big house, and I had another iron worker who needed a room, and we traded room for ride. He would furnish me a ride to work and back, and we gave him a room. So we both saved that way. But anyway, I saved a lot of money during that job. So when Arkwright quoted me the price of $6,000, the next day I drove to Katanning, went to the bank, and withdrew $6,000. I had more than that in there. And I came back and dished out $6,000 and bought the house. And that's how we ended up with it. Of course, we've done a lot of work to it because it needed a lot of work. But
you were responsible for a lot of the buildings around Morgantown.
Oh, yes.
That were built as an iron worker.
Yes, I worked on a PRT. I worked on all the bridges that cross the river in the county. I worked on the Uffington Bridge. I worked on the Westover Bridge. I worked on the 2 Star City bridges. I worked on a lot of bridges in Marion County. I did well working as an iron worker. I worked on a Coliseum. I worked on a new stadium. Those are stories in themselves and I worked at the hospital in Fairmont. Because I left the Coliseum, I was working at the Coliseum when the business agent decided he needed a foreman to go to Fairmont to work on a hospital. So he asked me to leave the Coliseum and go to work on the Fairmont Hospital. And I did. I worked there for a good while. But I've done a lot of construction work, and it paid good. And I'm still a retired iron worker, and I get a retirement check from them.
Mr. Birurakis, tell us more about the civic things that you did about the Scotch Run Museum sign and the Hall of Fame that you were in and the honorary captain for the WVU alumni game.
Well, the University High Alumni Hall of Fame was because of when I did my student teaching at University High, I was assigned to do the wrestling coaching. So I coached the wrestling team in 1950 when I was doing my student teaching. And the team, there was 3 wrestlers for University High that won state championship. So they did real well. And when we went back to University High, Mr. Colbank, who was a principal, congratulated me and the boys that did the winning. And he kind of encouraged me to apply for a job at University High. I think he had in mind of possibly using me, but when I went to the superintendent and applied for a job, I had an experience in junior high. When I graduated as a 9th grader, I was president of the class. And when they announced the names to get the diploma, somebody mispronounced my first name. And when it was my turn to get up, I was getting ready to get up, and the person said, Louise Berry. Well, I didn't get up because my name wasn't Louise. And they realized that they made a mistake and they corrected it, and I got up. Well, when I graduated from University High, I think the same superintendent was at the high school graduation that it was at the junior high, and he was there to present the diplomas. And when I went to University High, I think the same gentleman was there to present the diplomas. Well, when I went to get a job, when I applied for a job, that same superintendent realized that I was the one that changed the name from Barry to Birurakis. Because when I went to the superintendent's office and applied for a job, he was very cold. He wouldn't shake hands. He just come on in and very cold. And I think it was because I changed the name back to Birurakis. Because when I left, he wouldn't even shake hands when he excused me after an interview. And he wouldn't even shake hands with me. He just opened the door. And I thought, what in the world? Because I thought the principal wanted me to go to University High. And this gentleman, when I went to go out the door, he said, "You'll never teach in this county." And I thought, what in the world, what did I do? I didn't say that, but I was thinking, what did I do wrong? And I think it was because of the name change. I'm not sure, but he did tell me, he says, "You'll never teach in this county." That's the reason I ended up teaching in Mason County when I eventually got a job, because another teammate that played WVU was coaching there, and he's the one that wrote me a letter and sent me an application to fill out to get a job in Mason County. And he told me, he says, when you sign up, can you change your name back to Barry? And I thought, no way. So I didn't even fill the application out, because I knew that if I didn't change my name back to Barry, I wouldn't get a job. So I didn't fill it out. Then that was a coach at Point Pleasant. Well, the coach for Hannon High School job came open, which is a small high school out in the country, very small. And when they discussed the coaching job for Hannon, they didn't care about the name because it was a small school and they needed a coach. And so they offered me a job with my same Birurakis name. So I accepted that job, and I stayed there 4 years, but I left because of the finances. And the sign on the Pleasant Street Bridge, I think I just mentioned it, says, "Welcome to South Park Historic District." And when I saw that sign, I wondered, I said, "Oh, why is this classified as a historic district? History was made up Scotts Run." Because that's where the action was, with the shooting and the throwing fruit at each other because you were a union or non-union. So basically, that's where the history was made. So I thought the sign should be at the end of the Star City Bridge about Scotts Run. So I went to work for CSC, which did the work of collecting tickets at the games and managing the program, make sure nobody's fighting or anyway. So I got a job, and every dime I made, when I found out what the price of Welcome to Scotts Run by Duffer Sign Company up Shriver. She offered to make a sign. She's the one that made the sign for Morgantown. And when I found out, I asked her about a sign for Scotch Run. And she designed a sign that says, "Welcome to Scotch Run, historic Scotch Run." And she listed the little communities like Osage, Purslaw, Liberty. And, but when I went to work, every dime I made went to the fund to pay for that sign, because it was about $6,000, I think, something round about that. So every dime I made as a CSC employee went towards the sign. As soon as I got a check, I would meet with Patty Thomas and put that money towards a sign. And we eventually got enough money to, by going to the county commission and selling T-shirts and different things, we eventually got enough money to put the sign up, and it's still there. And now to change the subject a little bit, every Memorial Day and every Veterans Day, I sit on the end of the bridge on the other side of the road to the traffic coming into Star City from the mall or Route 7, and I have a big sign that says Veterans and Coal Miners Memorial Bridge. And I sit right close to a sign that says Edith Burrill Bridge, because I think the veterans and coal miners deserve it, the honor, more so than Edith. Edith needs to be recognized, but so do the veterans and coal miners. And so every Veterans Day and every Memorial Day, I sit for 1 hour at the west end of the Star City Bridge on the down on the lower, let's see, the river comes from Morgantown. Okay, so it would be on the upper side of on the opposite side of the road of the Welcome to Scotch Run. The Welcome to Scotch Run is on one side, and I sit on the other side, 1 hour every Memorial Day, and I have, the sign says, Veterans and Coal Miners Memorial Bridge. Honk if you agree. And I do get a few honks, but most people are speeding when they come through there. And unless they have a rider sitting beside them that reads the sign, they don't have time to, so I don't get a lot of honks, but I do get some. Especially people who know I'm doing it, they come by and they hit the horn. And but when they got this Welcome to Scotch Run sign put up, I was honored with a little plaque. I don't think we have that, did we? No, it's a little plaque. It was made in honor of my effort to get that sign put up, because I went to the county commission, I did many things to get that sign. And once it was up, we had a dinner at the shack recognizing, and I was presented with a plaque as an honorary for helping get that Scotch Run area sign. By the way, on that sign at South Park, I questioned that. I said, South Park is where the owners of the coal mines lived, and they had streets, they had inside bathrooms. The coal miners didn't. They lived in company houses that didn't have all the utilities, and so the Scotch Run needs to be reserved, more so be classified as a historic area because of all the action that was done. And And by the way, when I graduated from junior high school, the superintendent, when my name was mispronounced, he, after it was corrected, he commended me for being the president of the 9th grade class. Because I did make a little talk, and he commended me for it. And the Jefferson Award that I received a couple years ago, it's on Channel 5. They honor people who do things for the community that they live in. And my son-in-law recommended my being recognized to receive the Jefferson Award because of what I did to get the sign for Scotch Run, and also by getting T-shirts. I had T-shirts designed to represent different things that happened at the coal mines in Scotch Run, like the Osage mine explosion that killed a lot of people, the Bunker mine explosion, the Perch Club No. 2 mine that blew up. And that's another thing about the Perch Club No. 2. My dad was working in that mine the time that it blew up. And I have a statement from the coal company stating that he worked during that period, but he didn't go to work that day because my mother had a dream, and in her dream she said there was a disaster that killed a lot of coal miners, and she said, you're not going to go to work. And when my dad questioned her why she's saying that, she said because of the dream. And he said, that was just a dream, I'm going to go to work. And she said, I'm not packing your lunch. And because of the arguing, he missed going to work. And the mine did blow up, and I think it killed 20. And he would have been killed if he had gone to work. But he missed work because of her dream, and that saved his life.
I've heard that you were captain of an alumni football team.
Well, I was the honorary captain at the first game of 2016, and I was allowed on the field. And when they, at the beginning, when they flipped the coin, I was asked to go out on the field on a 50-yard line, and they introduced me as playing years ago, and they applauded, and I waved my hand, and I have a picture of it. But that was a great thing. I really appreciated that. Oh, and as I walked on the 50-yard line, Coach Holderson came up to me and shook my hand. And I jokingly, when I shook his hand, I said, if you need me, call me. But he didn't need me because they won the game, so they didn't need me. I played 4 years of football. I think I mentioned that. I played in 44, and after playing 1 year, I went to the service, and when I came back, I played 3 more years. I played in 48, 49, and 50. Coach Lewis was the last coach I had. He coached the 1950 team. Well, after I graduated in 50, I was presented with a life pass that entitled me to go to any sport event at WVU free. And I used it. When I was coaching at Hannon High School, I would even bring students up from Hannon High School to watch the game. and I would get in free, but I would buy their tickets so they could go. And I used it quite a bit. And I used it for baseball, I used it for any sport at WVU. So when they built the new stadium, which I worked on as an iron worker, after we finished building the new stadium, the first game that was played, all the construction workers were given free passes because of the construction. But after that, when I went to go to the, I don't know whether it was homecoming game, what game it was, but I have records of it. I went to the ticket office at the Coliseum, and I presented my life pass, and I said I'd like to go get a ticket for the game coming up. And the girl looked at the life pass, and she said, "We don't honor these anymore." And I thought, am I dead? It was a life pass. And she said, no. She said, we just don't honor them anymore. I said, will you check with your supervisor to make sure? She got up and she went to another room. Now, I don't know whether she talked any better or not, but she came back and she says, we don't recognize these anymore. So I didn't go to the game, and I was upset because I thought a life pass is a life pass. I must be dead. So anyway, so for a long time, I told this story a couple times to people who interviewed me, and one person responded with a remark like they should give him his life pass back. And this has been a good while since the new stadium was built. I haven't used. I do get tickets to the game, but let's see how. But I don't have the pass anymore. I can't go to the baseball games or basketball games. But I do get to go to the football games because I played football. But that life pass was for all sports. And I've approached the varsity club about going to a basketball game or baseball game. Then they shake their head, no, football only, because that's what you played. So, but I said life pass was a life pass for all sports. And I still have copies of it.
Mr. Birurakis, thank you so very much for coming here today to the museum to tell us about your experiences here in Morgantown and Scotch Run.
Okay, thank you for having me. I appreciate this, and I'm sure the family and friends will appreciate it. And it's great for Scotch Run.
And from all of us at the Morgantown History Museum, we'll see you again.